I'm Jeff Beer, and this is Brand New World from Fast Company. On today's episode, fresh off the Croisette and the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. Basically, the ad industry's Oscars, but also the global epicenter of brand culture. Brands, marketers, ad agencies, tech companies, platforms, entertainment, sports, any and everyone that is part of the brand world ecosystem was there. To try to make sense of it all, or at least a good portion of it, I'm calling up Tim Nudd, the creativity editor of Advertising Age and a journalist who's been covering and commenting on this industry for longer than almost anyone. Inside scoops, gossip, or just good stories, I'll be talking to Tim about what impressed him most, surprised him, and what he's hearing we can expect from major brands heading into the second half of this year. And then I chatted with Expensify's Chief Financial Officer, Ryan Schaefer, and Hannes Ciatti, founder and head creative at ad agency Alto, and we covered how Expensify landed such a prominent place in the blockbuster film F1, including a scene in which they actually shoot a commercial for the brand in the film. Start your engines. Let's go. You and I are both fresh off the Croisette, back in North America after covering the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity for, as your Instagram put it the other day, 6 days, 4 panels, 1 Palais talk, 9 stories, 11 videos, and about 15 hours of sleep. I feel like we have very similar, I would go, mine are 6 days, 4 panels, 8 videos, 1 knockoff Vespa, 0 hours of air-conditioned sleep. And actually this year, 0 glasses of rosé, I have to say, which is weird.
Oh, wow.
Mostly, I blame the scooter mostly for that. I could not be zipping around.
Were you staying out of town somewhere? Are you driving home at the end of the day?
I was down at the end of the Croisette, about from where all the action is, a 30-minute walk, 10-minute top scooter ride. Though I prefer beer to rosé, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Well, okay, so the 2025 Cannes Lion, how many does this make for you that you've been there?
First one I went to was 2011, and then, there were 2 that didn't happen because of COVID. So whatever that makes it, I don't know. Is that like 12 or 13, something like that? I can't do the fast math. I count myself lucky that I've been able to stay for, 4 months or something of my life in that town. It's like a super fun place to be, and this industry is so funny because it's so small. It's like you see everybody that's in the industry is there. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. And it's a great place to catch up with folks. And it is a boondoggle for some, I'm sure. But when we're there, we're it's like 24-hour kind of round-the-clock movement and content creation. And it's a little exhausting. I always tell people it's like the most fun week and the least fun week of the year.
I agree.
And yeah, I am going to be in recovery for a few more days.
That recovery seems to get longer as I get older. Well, you and I have a bit of an unofficial tradition, which broke down last year when the bus line stopped working. Every year, I feel like there was like 4 years in a row where I would get off the plane completely delirious from an overnight flight, get on the bus to Cannes from Nice airport, and every year I would just turn around and there was Tim.
Yeah, we would pregame together on the bus. Like, what are you up to this week? What are you up to this week?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a shame that, last year I got on the bus and we sat in the bus trying to get out of the airport for like 2 hours. And I actually had a meeting with Apple, no less, on Sunday afternoon that I was like, oh crap, I can't miss this meeting. And we moved like 10 feet in an hour on this bus that I was on, and it was super stressful. Anyway, this year I took the train for the first time, which I think you've taken the train before, but it's like 100 euros in a car, and it's pretty much just as easy to go on the train.
8 euros on the train.
Yeah, exactly. I've got to do the helicopter one of these days. I've never done that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what state the media business is over the next few years. Maybe that guaranteed basic income from AI will help us out. Okay, so almost every meeting in Cannes either ends or begins with the same question, I find, which is, what are you hearing? What's going on? Especially folks like you and I who, when you're talking to, whether it's a marketer or someone from an agency or a tech platform or wherever, they know we're talking to kind of a bit of a wide swath of people in terms of what they do and who they work for. So I'm going to ask you the same question. What was kind of the strongest or most frequent issue topic you were hearing about throughout the week from various people?
Yeah, I talked mostly to creatives throughout the week. I had a breakfast and a lunch that I hosted with some CMOs that were sort of private to us. So I kind of did both. I think AI, obviously, the efficiencies around that and the evolution of storytelling around that and back-end systems and things, like that was not surprisingly like the biggest thing. So at the CMO breakfast that we had, I felt, I did hear a lot of driving toward efficiencies with this, and production budgets are finding ways to do more with less on production, which is not a new story, but I hadn't heard it as directly.
Yeah.
I think that a certain tipping point has been reached with AI in terms of like, even not just in the industry, but broadly speaking. I think if you talk to people about something like ChatGPT, I think 6 months ago, 9 months ago, certainly a year ago at Cannes, like it was still sort of something that most people hadn't really tried or hadn't really done that much experimenting with. I think definitely in the last 6 months, in the last 3 months for sure, it's been this tremendous acceleration into that. I think people are using it in their workflows, kind of whatever role you're in, whether it's client side, agency side. There's a recognition of how powerful it is and how it can practically save you time and so on. But I think the implications of that are still kind of as murky as they ever were. There's definitely efficiencies on the production side. There's these CMOs now sort of talk openly in private settings about how this is going to really streamline, meaning replace jobs. And the big debate among the folks that I talk to were, what does this mean for the work? What does it mean for creative folks, particularly on the bottom end of the ladder? ChatGPT is great at very quickly coming up with 100 headlines. And so then does your job become, even as a junior creative, does it become sort of curation and sort of picking the best things that your AI agent has created for you? So does it add an even lower level of creative position below entry level, which is like the entry level folks are relying on this tool to then pitch their CDs? And there's a lot of debate around that internally. And some of these debates are interesting. I mean, some of these debates are, can AI create a really good script? And one creative director that I spoke to did a pretty interesting experiment, which is that he came up with a script. He wrote a script himself that he really liked. And then he tried to, through various prompting, tried to get AI to come up with the same idea. And he was sort of unable to, which I thought was, to him was heartening.
Right. Yeah.
But, there's a sense of like, what is the possibility here? How is it going to affect people? How is it going to affect storytelling? And AI was big at Cannes last year, but this year I think there was just more practical talk about it.
Yeah, and maybe even not enough, because some of the people I was talking, I've talked to a few CMOs that were like, yet again, obviously AI is a huge topic, but what they weren't hearing was enough for them anyway to be helpful was really specifics. Like, oh yeah, we're totally using AI or stuff like that. And then kind of like, oh, it's going to help with efficiencies and blah, blah, blah. But then getting down to a little more granular level, even in a private setting, wasn't maybe as satisfying as they would have liked. I mean, to me, the part that people are saying out loud last year was very much like all about reiterating the importance of the human side of the creative work. And that continued this year. But what I was hearing a little more, not much, but a little more was, speaking about the role of junior creatives and all that, they were definitely emphasizing the role of the human. But what we're not really saying too much is that there's going to be a lot fewer humans. There's definitely going to be, the humans are part of the equation no matter what. But what is speaking of junior creatives, like how many are you bringing in now? Way fewer. And when I pressed on that, they were like, yeah, I mean, it's not about people necessarily. I mean, this is almost in the best case scenario. It's not about people getting like laid off en masse. It's about not hiring anymore. It's about that kind of reorganization, which is that's more of a slow boil, right? When it comes to the industry.
And that's 1000% coming, less folks being hired. It was interesting. The week was kind of bookended by Apple, right? Tor Myron he's the head of marketing communications at Apple. He gave the first session of the week. It was called Human After All, and it was about how AI will never be fully human, can never kind of come up with these ideas. And then at the very last award show on Friday, he accepted the Creative Marketer of the Year award on behalf of Apple, and he essentially repeated the same idea, which is very heartening to people. People want to hear that. People want to hear this big tech company come out in support of that, and that makes a lot of sense. Part of me felt that there was a bit of forced optimism there, because there is going to be fewer, particularly on the holding company side. And a lot of these companies, WPP, I think VML introduced a new sort of a new mantra this week around humanity. Humanity in lockstep with AI is definitely a theme at the holding companies, but they're the ones that are going to be under the pressure to find those efficiencies. And I think it's interesting how independent agencies are starting to position themselves, which is, okay, we know that the holding companies are going to create economies of scale with AI for their global clients, and there's going to be fewer actual people working on the very sort of base inputs of campaigns. And you see the tech companies doing it as well. They're sort of positioning themselves as, oh, you can press a button and get an ad campaign for us. So that's on the holding company side. And then the indies are saying, well, where's the new creative talent going to go? And they're saying, well, they can come to us and actually learn the fundamentals, learn the craft of advertising, do the grunt work that eventually, you can't really understand how to create a big idea if you've never done it, if you've just relied on technology to give you your ideas. Like, that's not proper training. So I think the indie shops can make the argument, oh, we'll give you the training, and then we can sell at a premium, actually interesting advertising ideas that are going to break through, which will sit above this sea of sameness that everyone from the big clients that don't really care that much about great creative, that's what they're going to want because it's cheaper. And then the big tech platforms that really are just going to optimize the crap out of whatever you give it. But, at the same, by the same token, everybody at Cannes is just giving you the talking points that they want. So all of the holding companies are positioning it as great for them. All the indies are positioning it as great for them. Clients are saying it's going to be great for us. So cutting through that, I think it's going to be interesting when the holding companies do stop hiring and see what happens then.
Speaking of AI specificity, I really liked talking about, and I was on a panel, I did a day kind of stuff at the Omnicom space. And one of the panels was just kind of around the idea of LLMs as a new stakeholder as we move into kind of an agentic AI world, which for those who aren't, whatever, agentic AI sounds kind of creepy. It's basically like where the AI is working as an agent, like these chatbots where you could be like, hey, buy me a pair of blue shoes or a white t-shirt or whatever, and or book me a trip to whatever in this date, and it'll just go find you the best deal. Mm-hmm. So in that world, with our own lack of specificity, it's the LLMs that are going and picking things for us. So they're becoming a new commercial stakeholder. And how does a brand market itself to an LLM in that dynamic? And I found that conversation really interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I haven't really heard much about that.
Aaron Lanuti, who is head of Omnicom's PR and comms practice, had a lot of interesting things to say about this. But a lot of it was, to me, it kind of boiled down to, this is kind of a new, just like how advertisers had to figure out, not how to game, but how to figure out Google and SEO and search engine optimization for, like, when you Google basketball shoes, what makes your brand pop up faster? Is it a paid thing? Is it just reputational? Is it a magical combination of the two? Who knows? But this LLM thing is actually kind of fascinating. I mean, and speaking of like human dynamics, maybe it'll all be machines, but certainly there'll be another human element to figuring out how to address this new kind of stakeholder or side of commercialism.
Yeah, it sounds like AIs are going to have to try to persuade other AIs of stuff fairly soon, which maybe we can just get out of the way and let them figure it out.
Tell me what won the Grand Prix at the end of all of it.
That's right.
The other story that kind of came out, your former colleague was talking a lot about this, rightfully so, is the Wall Street Journal. I don't know if he helped write the story, but I always monitor what Patrick Coffey's doing. But their story on brands basically saying that they've been, for lack of a better word, blackmailed into advertising on X, saying, if you don't come back as an advertiser, we're going to sue you. There was a time when, after Elon took over X, that, with a lot of the not so great content on that platform, brands decided to step away. And there was a bit of I don't know if you'd call it an organized boycott, but some do. And now the platform was threatening to sue them for doing that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand why it's these are companies that could choose to do whatever they want with their money, but whatever. That story came out just before Cannes, that this was happening. And I believe it was Axios. Someone from Axios asked Linda Yaccarino, who's CEO of X, about it. And her response to me was very much from the Musk-Trump playbook of blaming the press. And everyone I mentioned this to, like, so did you guys get a call like that? And some were kind of very vague and kind of nodding, kind of, did you pay the money? Maybe we did. Maybe we did. And kind of laughing, and it was kind of like, it felt like a little bit of shut the hell up money, but it's not a great brand strategy for X to be like doing it. And even the ones who did kind of reluctantly sign back on, that's not a good basis for a relationship. And so I'm wondering, what you thought of that. Was anyone talking about that with you? And I just thought that was a bit of a buzz around midweek last week that made me laugh.
Yeah, I remember a year ago, Elon was at Cannes.
Yeah, Sport Beach.
And I remember he was at Sport Beach. We were, Brian Bonilla was kind of chasing him around, trying to...
Yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Like the whole sort of hiding in bushes kind of thing. It's kind of amusing. But yeah, you and our other agency reporter, Ewan Larkin, he came to Cannes for the first time this year, and he did a little bit of reporting around this, and he was at Sport Beach, asked Mark Penn about it, and it's weird, like the whole X thing, it's built on antagonisms, like year after year, it feels like. Unless I'm mistaken, I feel like the Omnicom IPG merger now has some boycott language baked into it. If it's going to go through, that the Omnicom has agreed not to engage in any sort of colluding boycotts against any platforms, and it's a weird world where the platforms can sort of exert this sort of influence and strong arm these advertising companies into agreeing to things like this. I mean, I didn't speak to too many people about that, but it's a bizarre thing, but not out of character for the way X has been operating under Musk.
Yeah, there's a couple of, on the agency side, folks I talk to, and I ask everyone this, especially in a setting so like Cannes where you're, I've said this a million times on this podcast and elsewhere, that Cannes kind of like the new year for this business. It's like you're looking back at awarding work, you're making deals and setting the course for the rest of the year. And I always ask, like, okay, so because I'm, one person at Fast Company, we cover a lot of different aspects of brands, from design to leadership to everything. But on the market advertising, I'm one of the very few. You have an entire publication dedicated to all the different aspects of this business. I always just ask, like, what, as Fast Company, how can we cover this that offers something different, complementary to what you and your colleagues at Ad Age and elsewhere cover the business? And one thing I was hearing, which I thought was interesting, because for those who don't know, why would you? I was at Ad Age for creativity specifically, which was part of Ad Age, and then Ad Age proper for the better part of 4 years, back 2006 to 2010. So I'm very familiar with the trade side of things. And people talked about the trades where they wanted it to be more celebratory and less negative. But it's like, you're a public business. This is stuff people care about, just like Hollywood trades or sports reporters. Sometimes the stories they tell, the people involved don't exactly want told, but this is how journalism speaks truth to power. What have you been hearing around this, and what's your sense? You're the one actually at Age. Do you get cornered on the street outside the Carlton, or what?
Not really. I mean, listen, I'm probably, because we are the ones doing that, we don't get a ton of flack. But if you're hearing that, that's pretty hilarious. I mean, listen, like, Cannes an interesting mix, right? Because I do think there is, while you're there, there is a reason to celebrate. Like, there's a lot of good energy there. There's a lot of people that have taken this moment to sort of look back. Everyone likes to look back and sort of say, oh, what was the best work? What is the industry at its best creatively? And I do think, for the most part, I mean, there's always going to be politics in the jury rooms. There's always going to be a certain level of, certain agencies are going to treat the awards cynically. Some are even going to cheat to try to get lions. There's all that negativity in there. But overall, I think it is a good opportunity to say, this is what advertising can do at its best. But that's only one piece. I mean, that's the awards, which to me, honestly, are a little bit separate from everything else going on at the festival these days. Agencies are getting sidelined a bit. Like, there's a lot of talk about how it's all about the work. It's not really all about the work. Hasn't been all about the work for a long time. It's about making deals that often cut agencies out of the chain. So there's a lot of stress, involved as well at these agencies. And so they're always trying to get whatever small edge they can out of the press. We oblige them when we feel like they deserve it, but we're not going to shy away from what's actually happening. If you lose accounts and your agency's on the skids, we're going to report that, obviously. Any suggestion that we wouldn't is kind of ridiculous. So I'm surprised, actually, that you were hearing complaints about that, because that's just our standard behavior. Like we have to, we're not going to not report on something.
Totally.
If it's negative to you. I mean, we wouldn't do it intentionally. Maybe there's a sense of unfairness about who we're writing about.
Well, look, I mean, I think that anyone who complains this is true with a lot of things, and I've heard self-aware people describe, in entertainment specifically, describe this as like, you might get 100 great reviews, but you remember the one shitty one, right? Like this is
Right.
kind of like, you open up Ad Age on any given day, there may be a business win-loss, a piece about someone who lost a piece of business, but then your section over at Creativity is celebrating 5 or 6 different pieces of work that, as industry standard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the way it is. It's more nuanced than that.
You can't accept the good and not the bad.
100%. Well, this is what they were pointing to, the breaking and entering guys, is this is what they prefer all coverage to be like. You're like, yeah, that plays a role.
And listen, I love those guys. I think those guys are great. I think they bring
Absolutely
an energy and like an enthusiasm. But yeah, you got to have all types. There's absolutely room for those guys. I think they do what they do really well. We're not them. And, we've got a role to play in the business. And yeah, if you want sort of just PR coverage, like you said, that's not going to come from us, unfortunately.
Buy a billboard. Let's get celebratory here, Tim. I want to talk about awards and some of the awards and some of the best work. And, some people listening would have heard of all the stuff we're going to talk about. Some would hear of none of it. And I wanted to start with, before I ask about any other, let's start with, to me, my favorite category is titanium. Because it's apples and oranges. To those who don't know, this is kind of like, there are all kinds of different categories specific to, there's outdoor, there's social, there's film, there's any sort of niche of advertising has its own little category. But titanium is kind of like, in my mind, the best picture at the Oscars, except it would be awarding like TV, music, and everything. It's like the Grammys, Emmys, Tonys, and Oscars all in one award, because it's kind of platform agnostic. And that's why I like it. I kind of remembered hearing about this. The winner was insurance company AXA for a campaign called 3 Words, which, and I'm going to oversimplify it here, is it's an insurance company in France. And home insurance is mandatory in France, and so everyone has it. And there's clauses in their policies for emergency situations of relocation, if your house is destroyed by fire, flood, and other emergency situations. And this campaign called 3 Words added 3 words to these contracts, and the 3 words are "and domestic violence," which means they treat that like your home was destroyed by fire. A woman calls, and she's picked up immediately along with her kids, provided a place to stay, as well as free psychological, legal, and financial support. And it was automatically added to like over 2 million home insurance contracts in France. I thought this was amazing. And I love the idea of creative utility. But what did you think of this as the winner for titanium?
Yeah, I mean, this campaign had gotten, a fair amount of buzz in the last, few months. It's quite new. It's from this spring, I think, is when it first
April.
When it first launched. So one thing that you and I both know about advertisers is, as much as purpose is kind of, the pendulum has swung back and there's not as much purpose awarded at Cannes, there is always going to be the sense among advertising people that if we can make a difference in the world, that's going to be a lot more important than just making a cool ad or something great to watch. So there's still this sense, and I totally get it, is like being educational or providing a real service that helps people is always going to supersede entertainment, which I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but it's definitely a sense. Listen, I think the AXA thing is wonderful. It's so simple. It did make a difference. The metrics I've seen, it's already making a huge difference. I think several hundred women have taken advantage of this.
They're up 9% in new customers, and this is since April.
Seems to be working for the brand, absolutely. So in that sense, I think it's a wonderful campaign. It also won 2 other Grand Prix this week, in addition to the titanium. So, it's gotten tons of love, and I do love it. I think part of it's just the simplicity. The other thing I thought was cool was, as I was leaving Cannes, I saw the campaign in market at the airport. It was on the billboards in the Nice airport. So it's definitely, Cannes has been renowned for awarding things that ran once at like 2 a.m. or something. This is not one of those. This is a big campaign that's got a lot of media behind it. Agency in Paris called Publicis Conseil created it. They were Agency of the Year this year as partly on the strength of this work. They were Agency of the Year last year in Cannes. They've been on quite a roll, so it's interesting. And we're in France, and a French agency won the Titanium Grand Prix. That was cool. But as far as purpose work goes, I think this is a great example of it's not just lip service, it's a real thing. And there was a few different campaigns actually this year that sort of found loopholes in legal documents or tried to engage somehow in the arcane sort of policies of companies like this. And I think what happens now, of course, is that many other agencies will start looking at their own brands and seeing what legal loopholes they can find to sort of, win a lion in this way too. And I don't think it's a bad strategy. I think it's like, I like it. If you're going to try to mimic something that's making a difference in the real world, not just a sort of a creative trend or something.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that like the thing that makes this stick out is it's actually part of their product. It's not a contest. There would be a contest around domestic violence, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like this thing that's temporary. It's not a limited edition. Someone was talking about brand entertainment. I talked to a lot of people about brand entertainment, obviously. And actually last podcast, Esh Panadurai from Meta, and I was talking like, how do you evaluate entertainment? Because he's done this in multiple brands throughout his career. How do you evaluate entertainment possibilities or stories and how that story is going to live and how it relates to the brand? Like, what's that checklist or criteria look like? And he had a nice way of putting it where he was like, you can't go into something going like, you know what, we should make a movie. Let's make a movie. And then go look at your brand and find a story that might be a movie. He's like, you need to be like constantly reevaluating and looking and searching for stories around your brand. And then once you find a good story, then you can try and figure out what the best execution of that story would be. Whether that might be a movie, but it might be something else. And this is like, you're finding something about your brand. Oh, we already do this for flood, fire, whatever. Maybe we could help in another way. Did you have any other favorites on that short list for Titan that you either thought was going to win or you yourself would have been like, that would have got your vote? And let's take AXA off the table, like, because you can't vote for that, just so we're not voting against the winner. But like, what would you pick from the remaining shortlisters?
That is a good question. I would probably need to look at it.
While you look it up, I'm going to tell you mine. How about that?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, my favorite was, and again, another Publicis, unbelievable. Publicis Dublin and Le Pub did the Heineken pub succession work, which for those who haven't seen it, there was a law back maybe 200 years ago that Irish pubs had to have the name of the proprietor above the door. So that's why there's so many like McCarthy's and McCaughlin's and whatever, all the bars named named after last names. But something like 84% of family members right now don't want to take over the family pub. So there's this succession problem. And there was a pub called McCaughlin's Bar off Ireland's west coast that's been in that family for 4 generations, in the community for 155 years. So they teamed up with the owner, Josie McLaughlin, who's like 70 years old, and basically created this campaign looking for another McLaughlin to take it over. And speaking of like the non-can, like this was not, one ad aired in Portugal at 2 a.m. This is like 128 countries, 88 million Irish targeted around the world. I mean, they ran from, this guy was in Times Square. They had a picture of his pub and himself in Times Square to Vietnam. I mean, everywhere. And it got over 1 billion earned media impressions. And so lots of news coverage. Obviously, it's hilarious. They got more than 2,000 applications. And they found one from my hometown. 37-year-old Alan McLaughlin from Toronto is the one that they got to go over.
Amazing.
And then they sort of extended the platform. So if you're a bar owner or you're someone with an Irish last name, you can connect and see if you want to be the successor to these pubs. I liked it because, I mean, obviously it's kind of bonkers and hilarious, but actually there is a real world problem there as sort of novel as it all is. But it did remind me of, do you remember back in 2009, the Australian tourism campaign? I think it's like best job in the world or something. It was like one of those things where come work in Australia. It was like, I think it was a 6-month contract to basically travel around Queensland, Australia, and be like an ambassador. And I looked it up earlier. They got over like 34,000 applications on that one back in 2009. But I really love the pub succession one because it came out, it was launched, and obviously I should say St. Patrick's Day when people are thinking about Irish pubs.
I like that one too. What's interesting about that one is that it's not like a one-off. Like Heineken does these things around the world. They did it last year with Pub Museum, where they, trying to save pubs based on, by turning them into actual museums so they could be protected. And
Oh yeah.
it's funny how the agency is Le Pub. Everything is around pubs, and of course it's a pub. It's Le Pub because it's a publicist agency, but they do all sorts of fun stuff. Another thing they did recently was there were these two Arsenal fans, these women that were fans of the Arsenal women's team, and the Arsenal women's team was playing, I believe, in Spain in the Champions League final this spring. But these women didn't want to travel there because they have a superstition that they have to be at the corner seats at their pub. And so what Heineken did was they recreated the pub exactly, and they put it on a truck bed, and they shipped it to Spain so that these women could be at the game. And they do stuff like that. And they've done, I don't know how many campaigns they do a year like this, but they're in so many markets, and they do individual stunts like this in every market around the world. And they've really built up this creative pedigree at that company, and it's great to see. It's funny though, I will say, one of the things that happened at Cannes last week was that, talking about AI, an agency put together an AI jury to pick the Titanium winner. And they fed it all the transcripts of all the Titanium jury discussions, all the case studies and stuff. Yeah, they fed it all past winners.
Oh, the discussions too. Oh,
the
wow.
discussions as well. And the AI jury picked Pub Succession as its Titanium Grand Prix winner. You're in good company.
I'm a machine.
With the machine that liked it as well.
That's hilarious.
Which was pretty hilarious.
My last question before, again, like we said, Ken is like, what's next? That's everything's talking about. What are the big deals, or we've talked about kind of what people are concerned about. I mean, obviously it's a wide range. Coming out of Cannes for yourself, looking towards the rest of 2025, based on kind of the conversations you had or what you were seeing and observing, what are you thinking about most for the second half of this year, or expecting to see?
One thing that was interesting this year is they introduced what was called the long-term brand platform, like a subcategory in many of the Lions contests, which I found a little controversial because creative effectiveness had this creative strategy. So suddenly, if I'm Dove, I'm able to submit 20 years of the Real Beauty campaign, which I felt was kind of unfair to some of these campaigns that launched last year. Like, how am I going to compete against 20 years of that, or 10 years of Apple shot on iPhone, which
there should be a year thing, like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Or it should be completely its own category. The Apple shot on iPhone won in creative effectiveness, which for its 10 years of work. But, essentially all our conversation we had about AI and things and how fast things are moving now, that reminded me of, when you do stick to something, when you have consistency, when you have a campaign that doesn't have to change once a year. I just wonder, in the age of AI that we're coming into, and with the opportunity to change literally anything and everything at a drop of a hat, like the temptation to do that and to try new things, which by the way has always been there for clients. Like, if you're a new CMO coming in, it's very difficult to want to continue anything that's happened before you. But so many of these brands have demonstrated that like longer term thinking is the key to sort of setting yourself up for success on the brand side. And, those campaigns that I mentioned, there were several others shortlisted, particularly in glass, like the Sandy Hook Promise, or some of this work that really sticks to a single message, has great success with it. I wonder if companies are going to get away from that. And this is not to say that you can't, in social, do really interesting things, try new things. You should be constantly trying to be relevant in culture. But I guess to me, that's, that doesn't involve jumping from one thing to another. Like, you got to have a through line as a brand. And in tough times, a through line, I think, really will help you maintain an audience, maintain a sense of credibility in what you're selling and what you're trying to sort of stand for in the world. So that's the biggest thing for me right now, is like looking for brands who are going to stick to what they're doing. How that plays out the rest of the year, I'm not sure, but I think that's what Cannes is useful for as well, is to just remind brands that there's value in sort of staying power, and there's value in building something that will last. And, I think David Droga actually has talked about this before, which is you can create fireworks and you can create lighthouses. And fireworks are a thing that happens once, and it's really spectacular and it's really cool. But what most brands really need to do is like build a lighthouse that's like creatively enduring over time. And I worry that our age of marketing is kind of heading towards like mostly fireworks. And I think that that's going to be a drag to cover, and it's not going to be great for these companies looking to build long-term equity. So I think that'll be interesting to watch going forward.
I completely agree. I had a great conversation with Brent Anderson and Katrina DeBow at Media Arts Lab, who, for those who don't know, has been Apple's, this year's Creative Market of the Year, Apple's agency for 40 years. I don't know, a long time. And pretty much from the beginning, or at least since, early Steve Jobs. So they had a lot of great things to say about the value of that, having that relationship, the shorthand you develop. And then also with Mars Snacking CMO Rankin Carroll, fellow Canadian, had a chat with him, and he's talked about just the value of creative consistency. As silly as it sounds, you look at the M&M's characters, you look at the Snickers, you're not yourself when you're hungry, which I believe was maybe a Jerry Graff creation at some point back in the day, for all you ad nerds. But that consistency over so many years actually also helps. The lighthouse, I think, is the best way to combat or at least navigate media fragmentation as well. Like you talk about like the business and obviously cultural relevancy, et cetera, familiarity, and building upon that familiarity, I think has immense value. And those folks were echoing a lot of your points.
Yeah. I mean, Taste the Rainbow. That's 20 years old, 20 plus
totally,
years old.
Totally. I thought that's just the best way to end the podcast. Taste the Rainbow. See you later.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Time for a quick break. And when we come back, I'll be talking to Expensify Chief Financial Officer Ryan Schaefer and Alto Chief Creative Officer Hannes Giatti about how the brand nabbed pole position in Apple's new racing blockbuster, F1. Okay, now it's time for the CMO sit down, where I talk to senior marketing leaders about a project or piece of work that's hit especially hard. On June 27th, Apple premiered its newest blockbuster film, F1, starring Brad Pitt. And if you saw the trailers, posters, ads, or anything in between, you've also seen that expense management financial brand Expensify was front and center. On the car, on the helmet, and yes, across Brad Pitt's chest on the racing suit itself. So, this episode, I'm sitting down with Expensify's Chief Financial Officer, Ryan Schaefer, and Hannes Giatti, founder and chief creative ad agency Alto, to hear how and why Expensify landed this starring role. Let's start at the very beginning because, anyone watch it looks so natural. And obviously, I've listened to some interviews with Brad Pitt about the filming process and how over that process, they were kind of integrated into the F1 world, like having spots before races, during media events. Like it was pretty full on, like to make it as realistic as possible. I know Lewis Hamilton was a consultant on it. So how does Expensify get into F1? That's the most basic question. How did this come about? Ryan, maybe we'll start with you. How did you start talking to Hannes about what your goal was generally? When did this conversation start, and where did it roll from there?
Yeah, so we worked with Hannes and the team at Alto on our Super Bowl ad. We also did a music video with 2 Chainz. After that, 2 Chainz was obviously in our Super Bowl ad, and then we did some extra stuff with him on his next big single. And then we also did another content piece with Trevor Noah. So we'd been in contact with them post Super Bowl as well. And we're thinking, okay, that went great. Won a bunch of awards. It was great for the business. It was very cool. What's next? And we're trying to figure out our goals. And I don't remember the exact brief because this was years ago, but we want to be part of the culture. The Super Bowl was interesting because it's the one time a year when people are looking for ads. They want to see an ad. And the rest of the year, they're trying to avoid ads, right? So that's what we liked about the Super Bowl is people are going to seek out our ad, which is an interesting dynamic. So we thought, okay, how do we get people to see our brand without it feeling like an ad? And so we had come to the conclusion that we wanted to be part of some popular media piece, something that might have some cultural cachet. And we want people to start using Expensify as a verb. Some of our users already do, but that's just, a small subset of people. And how do we introduce ourselves to more people around the world? Our business is a little interesting. We do expense reports, different than most fintech software. The majority of our users are not decision makers. They're just regular employees, which means that as we sell bottom up, basically. So we advertise to employees. They can download it for free. We don't make you get your boss involved. You can just start using our app, and then we show you how good it is, and then you sell us to your boss. And that is basically how our business has grown. Because the person that bears the pain of expense reports isn't the back office admin. It's the salespeople on the road or people going to conferences, that type of stuff. So we kind of sell to consumers. We're selling business software to consumers who then sell us to their boss. So this is why we kind of do these big brand moments, which is really different from a lot of business software.
Yeah, you think it would be like not counterintuitive in terms of like sometimes you see like B2B brands kind of go big pop culture, but then it's kind of as a regular consumer, you're kind of like, why are they doing this? But this makes sense.
Yeah, I think they do that because decision makers also see that type of stuff, but we get the added benefit that we're actually trying to reach everyone. So basically, if you are employed, you're probably going to do an expense report at some point in your career, and therefore you're a good lead for us. So we want to get in front of you. So we came back to the team at Alto and we said, we want to do something on the scale of Super Bowl, but not the Super Bowl again. And what do you guys think? And
that's a pretty wide brief. That's a pretty wide brief, eh?
Like go, basically. And I'm sure Hannes has.
Yeah, Hannes, what do you hear when you hear a brief like that? Where's your mind go immediately?
Oh, pure excitement, I think. I love the Expensify team. They're such a bold crew. They really want to be truly part of culture and really be in the zeitgeist with their brand. And so when we heard that brief, we were over the moon. We were like, okay, finally, that's the brief we're living for. So that was extremely exciting.
When was that happening? And when do you start to dig into actually get a checklist, I assume, or something where like, okay, pop culture moments, how do we do this? Like there's obviously a huge, so the Super Bowl spot, and correct me if I'm wrong, was this the 2019 Super Bowl?
Yeah, that's correct.
Everyone knows your name because you got 2 Chainz and you got Adam Scott and an awesome ad that extends into a video. So you've got music, you got, comedy in a way with Adam. How do you start thinking of a pop culture opportunity and how do you land on F1? Because the timing, in terms of movies in production, pre-production, all these things, how did this start?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Like the Expensify, this music video did so well, like within days, like when we launched it, it became like the #1 hip hop song on Vivo and racked up 20 million views. And people really want to use Expensify, download the app and expense like 200K as sculpted Lamborghinis. And so we did ask ourselves, how can we top that? And how do we go beyond that? But I think that all requires like a lot of strategy and a strategic process and how you go into that. And it's well beyond, I think, the advertising creative process. So what we do is, when we identify those roles, and when we try to find like that strategic rigor, we look first at what the brand is and where the brand stands and what's the clear role of the brand within this. And with Expensify, they're the fastest and easiest way to do expenses. They have really amazing technology that helps you to do mundane tasks that nobody wants to do. Not often even accountants do them very quickly and go back to what you love doing. And so that was our starting point to like really know what the brand is all about. And once we had that and we nailed that down with Ryan and his team, we then started our brainstorming and researching into an array of entertainment properties that would fit for Expensify. We have a lot of contacts in the entertainment industry, and that went then into feature films, social content, documentaries, TV shows, Like even we talked about custom created shows for Expensify, where they would have a starring role. So you would even have like written original content. For example, we also spoke to the makers of Yellowstone and Tyler Sheridan. And so we had like, as you can imagine, like hundreds of opportunities in brand integration. And then ultimately like the strategy that helped us to bring it back to what is Expensify about, and then truly make it also about their ambitions to be within this piece of content and this piece of entertainment, not just in an awkward way, force fit it into a few seconds and here's your cocaine or here's your car, but a holistic story, really a holistic story where they could be part of it. And then after much vetting and planning, we identified this sponsorship with F1, the movie, and it felt strategically perfect. Expensify is all about getting your money back fast, and F1 is all about cars, and they are fast. And on top of that, as you were saying at the beginning, brands are just naturally part of the F1 world. Like they are in there and they naturally fit in there. To see a logo in the F1 world, it's just table stakes. It's normal. And then on top of that, what we really found amazing, like even in 2021, the F1 mania was just in high gear, like everywhere throughout the US, throughout the world. The Netflix show Drive to Survive really pushed that further. I grew up with F1 in Italy and Ferrari, it was like a weekly, bi-weekly occasion where everyone just in bars, like going crazy. But I think the show helped really the sport to new heights. So that was a really good starting point, and I think that's what got Expensify and Ryan and the team really excited. But rather than just exchanging dollars for logo placement, we work closely actually with Expensify and the filmmakers to ensure that the brand was woven into the fabric of the film, that it appeared seamlessly within the film, and it was guaranteed to be noticed. And just a few examples of that is that we had it visible across the car. We really wanted it on the car, on the best placements. One big push from Ryan teams came actually that it is the cockpit view. We have the Expensify logo on there. So it's a very prominent and very iconic, I would say, view out of an F1 car. We're on the spoiler of the car, we're on the side of the car. And obviously we're on the man himself, Brad Pitt's chest, which is incredible. And also Dempsey and Idris. And then we also found this moment within the film that we doing a real meta moment where there is actually a commercial within the film where Dempsey and Idris holds an Expensify card, and it is a commercial moment like it would be for any athlete. So we brought that in. Ryan can talk more about this. He actually got a cameo in the film as well. He traveled to Budapest with our managing director at Rogers, and they were part of the filming there. On top of that, we also made sure that verbally Expensify was multiple times named in the film. On top of just logos, it's actually, Expensify is the real sponsor and the real main sponsor of the film.
So logo placement, the emphasis on mentioning the brand kind of out loud. How do you negotiate those placements and beyond that? I mean, it's one thing to be like, this is what interested me the most about talking to you guys, because it's one thing to have the logo on there. It's a whole other thing to be kind of included in the script in a way and discuss that way within the film. What are those conversations like, and how do you get a place like that in the film?
You touched on a few very good things. Like Expensify had big ambitions when they heard about the opportunity to be the title sponsor. Like that was their thing. They want to be the number one. They wanted to be a big logo on there. They wanted to be the name that gets dropped when they say Apex Expensify F1 team. And so that was the starting point. You are right. There are naturally a lot of filters. There are very sophisticated filmmakers, as you could imagine. Joseph Kosinski and Jerry Bruckheimer created so many amazing blockbusters over the years.
Top Gun.
Yeah. It's harder to get a logo in there.
Yeah. It wouldn't be quite as seamless on the side of the fighter jet.
Yes, but that's our next goal, to put it on the fighter jet.
Perfect.
But yes, I think it was partly the name Expensify. It sounds fast. It sounds good. It's a cool logo that Expensify has, and fintech naturally fits in there. I think partly also, Apple has a lot of competitors in the technology world, so Expensify is not really one of them.
Right.
So that was probably a positive point on that. And I think the track record of Expensify doing the music video with 2 Chainz, naturally being in entertainment, doing like things really well over the years with the IPO, they definitely vetted, I would assume, Expensify in the right way. And so we ticked all the right boxes. Obviously, it's an exchange of money, but that was not the only thing that was part of that process.
Yeah. I was going to say, I can read it way clearer than I can read Shark Ninja.
Yes.
though it's there. I can see, I saw most of the brands, though I'm paying attention to that stuff. So the drivers are shooting an ad at some point in the film. Is that part of it?
Yeah, so Damson Idris is actually making an Expensify ad within the film, which is pretty cool, I think. He's holding up an Expensify card. It's a photo shoot slash, ad shoot.
Yeah.
And they're mimicking what, athletes have to do every day in this era of sports sponsorship. But it's a natural moment that really fits well within it. So I think they did it really well to have a cameo in there of the Expensify card.
Nice. When you start listing off all this stuff, the title sponsor and the logo placement, and I guess I'd say plot inclusion in a way that comes along with that, how would you compare even broadly this as an investment to other types of brand work Expensify's done and you've worked on? Because I know most people would look at this and be like, oh my God, this must have just cost so much money. How did this compare?
We think that also like our job isn't just to communicate, it's actually to connect people with brands, to make them feel something about the brand.
Okay.
And I think if you do that in the right way, brands can thrill, they can delight, and most importantly also entertain and impact culture in the right way. If you do a Times Square billboard or you do something on Twitch or movies, the only thing that people really care about is whether your content is good or bad, whether they're annoyed or happy when the brand showed up. So we made everything from music videos to shows and movie and traditional ad, and we love doing all of it. But I think ultimately it's about showing up in the right way and doing it in the right way. And that makes people happy when they see the brand or when they notice the brand, or it's like just seamlessly woven in within the story.
So the one person that counts is Ryan. He's the CFO. That's why I love that Ryan's here talking about it, because he's not the CMO. He's not just involved in the marketing. I mean, he's the CFO, which is, if you talk to any chief marketing officer, the CFO is the one they got to market this idea to, in a lot of ways, an idea like this to get it done. How does the investment that Expensify looks at towards F1 and you guys look at it when you saw it as an opportunity compare to something like that's the Super Bowl work? I realize it was years ago, but just in context, is it in the same ballpark? Obviously, it's meant to pay off.
Yeah, so we talked about the investment or the cost and what kind of impact that would have. And I did the pitch. I pitched it to the board and everything because it's a big decision to do this.
Yeah.
And the pitch is kind of, hey, we're going to spend X dollars on this and we're going to get the title sponsorship. It's going to be on the jersey. It's going to be everywhere and it's going to be on Brad's chest. And they are obviously going to promote images of Brad.
Movie posters, everything, right?
We're going to spend X amount, and then a bunch of other companies are going to spend many, many, many multiples of our investment to get these images out into the world. So this is a way to get a huge outsized ROI just in terms of awareness and impressions versus the alternative is, okay, we're going to spend that money on AdWords or give it to some influencer or something, right? Like the amount of impressions it's a huge multiplier. Other companies much larger than ours are going to be promoting our logo, not on purpose, but they're going to be promoting.
That's a really good point.
They're going to be promoting images that we can't help but be in by nature of this sponsorship. So that was extremely exciting to us.
Yeah, that's a rising tide floats all boats kind of thing. If Geico's promoting this or Shark Ninja or one of the other of the Apex team sponsors, you're right there.
Yeah, so we have 20 companies right now promoting our logo. Heineken's running a spot where we're very featured in, and we've never spoken to them. There's so many commercials where we're just in the commercial. We were in the Doja Cat music video, or the Don Toliver with featuring Doja Cat
Yeah.
music video for like 30 seconds. And that would have cost a lot of money to be in, but we didn't pay anything additional for that. Damson Idris did his very dramatic viral moment at the Met Gala.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't pay for that. We didn't know all this was going to happen, but we hypothesized that stuff like this would happen. I personally am very relieved and excited that it kind of worked the way we hoped it would.
Nice. You started talking about the Super Bowl work and how it was like, okay, let's find another cultural moment to be a part of. What were kind of the lessons from that experience back in 2019 that helped most informing this or giving the confidence to make this kind of investment and kind of take a spin around the track, to use a pun on this type of movie marketing?
Yeah, so the signups spiked and remained elevated for about 9 months afterwards, and then kind of
Oh, wow. That's long.
slowly regressed to it had a very long kind of knock-on effect afterwards, which was, great for the business. Slowly regressed to the mean. People stopped thinking about. When you stop putting yourself in front of them, they stop thinking about you, right? So we wanted to do something like that again. And in terms of what we learned, we got so many signups, but a lot of them were less qualified, signups than what we had seen in the past. So it's in preparation for this, we really adjusted our product roadmap, saying, okay, we're about to get a huge influx of users, and not all of them they're not warm leads. These are people that have saw a movie, right? Like generally when someone signs up, they saw an ad and they went to us, or someone recommended it to them. Like those aren't hot leads, but there's some form of intent here.
I'm doing my expenses and it's a pain in the ass, and I just happened to see an ad for this and I'm going to try it. That's lukewarm, right?
Right. These people will have just seen a movie, right? So like that's not a marketing qualified lead, right? So how do we adjust everything around this idea that a huge tidal wave of cold leads are going to come, and they're not exactly sure who you are, what you do. They just know they've seen your logo a million times. So how do you get them ready?
I feel like there should be a giant link in the middle of your site that says, so you saw the movie, and it's just like this is what this actually is.
Yeah, we had entire teams dedicated, which completely redid our sign up flow and the educational new user experience and all that, assuming they've never even heard of an Expensify. So that's kind of how we got ready for it.
This movie's going to be on Apple for, as long as I'm sure we're alive, and or at least somewhere, and that logo is going to be there. People are going to be watching this for a long time and repeat watching it too. So it feels like a significant investment there. What was the biggest challenge, either for you to pitch to the board to convince them, or in your own decision-making process? Because it does, looking at it, feels, and hearing about it, it feels like if it's available, it's maybe not a no-brainer, but certainly a really compelling place to be as a brand. What was the hardest part of this decision for you on this?
It was not unanimously accepted immediately. I had to there was a long discussion on it, right?
Okay.
So
was there a straw that broke the camel's back that made it happen? What was the key point? What was the winning? The
CEO was also excited, so it was
that helps.
CEO and CFO are really excited, so we had some momentum, but not everyone, at least in the United States, knows about F1. So they're kind of just like, okay, what is this, like NASCAR? So he's like, no, why don't you go home and watch Netflix Drive to Survive? This is very cool. This is the fastest growing sport or whatever, and among Gen Z, it's extremely popular compared to other demographics as well. So it's kind of right down the barrel of where we want to be. And you might not be our target audience because you've never heard of this. Basically, we said, go watch Drive to Survive, and then let's talk about this next week. And they agreed. I mean, we got approval. Now we have a whole company of F1 fans, where before we didn't really.
Perfect. I want to talk about your cameo or your appearance or your slight. I haven't seen the movie yet because it just dropped today. Tell me about how you got at least a moment here in the film yourself, and what was that like?
In the negotiation phase, and maybe I only know my experience. He might have some other side on this. You're negotiating price and all this stuff. And I think they suggested it first. So that's like pretty non-committal. But they've been great partners and they honor their word. And we had a marketing summit where all the kind of marketing or all the sponsors all met in Hungary at that Hungary race, actually. So I went out and we had a whole bunch of meetings and we got to see everything. And then after lunch, they're like, all right, you want to be in the movie? And, so they brought us into what I thought was just a cool party. And it just looked like a whole bunch of influencers. So they handed me a champagne. I'm like, and then everyone stopped and looked around. And it was the weirdest moment. I realized this party I was in was a set and everyone around me was an actor. I was the only actual real person
It's like the juror
in this room. But I had this very weird, like existential moment because I thought I was just with a bunch of people and I realized they're all acting. So I've seen the spot. It's not a major piece. I'm in the background. So for about a second. So I don't think you would notice it, but it was really cool. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, that the jury duty's the show I was thinking of, where like one guy thinks everyone else is everyone else is an actor, and there's one guy that's real.
Yeah.
When you guys are evaluating how brands perform, how brand appearances or obviously product placement on steroids, films and TV performs, what are kind of the benchmarks? What do you guys look at from within the business? Do you guys have any that you look at and you're like, oh, if we could do this that they did, or even close to that? Obviously, there's not direct comparisons, but anything that pops out to you that you're like, oh, this brand was just like so naturally part of this. Like, what are you kind of aiming for when you're thinking of that?
We're actually having a lot of those discussions at Alto, just because we're so driven to make this entertainment brand partnerships happening. And to your point, there are not that many where you're like, oh, jackpot. Obviously, as you said, the Barbie movie comes to mind, Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, and everyone was in it and got the world talking. And then even the Lego movies, they had a first few runs where they tried themselves and didn't work with a studio that ended up terrible. And then they had this magic partnership with Warner Brothers that put them to new heights. But you probably think about a DeLorean car in Back to the Future. That was like, everyone remembers that. And there was, for example, in the movie, Lion the movie. That is always for me, and I talked to Garth Davis because we worked on a few commercials together, like, how did Google get in there? How was Google part of this? And he's like, they weren't part of it. We didn't really get money from them, but we asked them a lot of questions, how it would work, and the technology at that time would work, and they were so helpful for us to do that. But I always found Lion the movie was truly a massive brand integration that showed the power of technology in the best way possible, right? Finding your family that you were split up as when you were a baby is pretty incredible.
Using Google Maps and Google, yeah. Exactly. I'm surprised you didn't say Mini Cooper and the Italian Job, given that you're in Sardinia right now and you're Italian.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan, this idea was a while ago now, and how, speaking of the trailers, everything leading up to the premiere date, which is today as we're recording, how are you feeling today about an investment you kind of started rolling 4 years ago?
Extremely excited. Obviously this is something I've been working on for a long time, and anxiety, and then there was the writer's strike at one point, and we're like, okay, uh-oh, and that pushes everything back, and so it's been a long journey. So I think today I'm just excited. We're doing a screening tonight with all the employees, so I've seen the movie but no one else has, so I'm excited for all the employees to see it. We're pretending we're doing a movie premiere, so we rented out a local theater and we're gonna have a red carpet and everyone's gonna drive up in black cars and photos and the whole thing. So just, a silly, fun little event tonight. So it should be fun.
Awesome.
I'm really excited. And I think it's already surpassed our expectations. When the full might of Apple's marketing kind of comes to bear, we've seen how crazy that is. And that was the kind of the core hypothesis of this, is that this could happen. And, it really has. So I'm absolutely thrilled.
Nice. And I assume there's going to be a framed screenshot of your appearance in the film next to the suit hanging on your office wall.
I just want to caveat. It's so fast. It is so fast. So I think once it comes out on Apple TV, I'm going to have to speak directly to like the 1 second where I'm in the background, and then I'll download that, like take a picture to prove to people that I wasn't lying, that I actually am in it. Because I think it's tough to notice me otherwise.
It still counts. You should run a contest if someone can see you. Let's they get something.
Yeah.
We actually joked about that if you can find Ryan, the CFO for Expensify, you get $1 million.
I'll be on the lookout for sure then. Nice. Listen, thanks so much, guys. This is great. I look forward to seeing how it all rolls out in the next week, month, and beyond. And I look forward to somehow being able to find Ryan at some point in that movie.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Jeff.
That's all for today's episode. Brand New World is part of the Fast Company Podcast Network. Our producers are Hawa Atori and Avery Miles. Editing by Blake Odom. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Be sure to subscribe to Brand New World on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. You can also hear all episodes in the Most Innovative Companies podcast feed. If you like this podcast, leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, or let us know in the comments of Fast Company's social media. We're basically on every app you can think of. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.